Summer 1943. The Texas sun rose red as a branding iron, spilling light over a stretch of land that looked more like a painting left unfinished than a battlefield. Dust shimmered across the flat horizon, where a barbed wire fence drew long, thin shadows that trembled in the morning heat. Beyond it, women in coarse gray uniforms stood motionless, their eyes fixed not on the guards but on the column of smoke rising from the camp kitchen. The smell, rich, unmistakable, and almost cruel, was bacon. Captain Ray Henderson leaned against the porch rail of the mess hall, hat tipped low, watching the scene unfold with the unease of a man who'd seen too much war from too far away. He'd spent his life herding cattle, not people, but orders were orders. The Army had built this camp on what used to be his own ranch. Hereford soil turned into foreign ground overnight. Now he managed inventory, rations, uniforms, and prisoners of war. He took to it like a man takes to a saddle that doesn't quite fit. Inside, Sergeant Luis Morales stirred a skillet big enough to feed a company, humming a tune too cheerful for wartime. His dark hair stuck to his forehead. His apron was streaked with grease. Morales had a theory that no man, woman, or enemy could stay angry while bacon sizzled. "If Hitler had my kitchen," he muttered, flipping another strip, "he'd have quit before breakfast." Private Eddie Reese snorted from the corner, too young to hide his grin. "Careful, Sarge. You're about to win the war with pork fat." Morales winked. "Then put that on the record, kid." The Battle of the Skillet, 1943. The kitchen door swung open, and the scent spilled into the open yard. Across the fence, one of the women flinched as if struck. She was tall, with a sharp, elegant face, her blonde hair twisted tight beneath a faded kerchief. Helga Bauer, former Red Cross nurse, stood apart from the others, too proud, too still. Next to her, Ingrid Keller, once a schoolteacher from Munich, shaded her eyes, squinting toward the rising smoke. "It smells like home," Ingrid murmured in German, then bit her lip as though she'd said something forbidden. Helga said nothing, her gaze fixed on the frying pans, as if they held a mirror to everything she'd lost. She'd been captured in Tunisia months earlier, still wearing her white nurse's armband. The journey across the ocean had stripped her of everything but the habit of composure. She could survive hunger, fear, even loneliness, but not the humiliation of being pitted. Henderson walked down the steps, the boards creaking under his boots. The guard straightened. He didn't bark orders. He rarely had to. His voice carried the slow certainty of a man who'd grown up giving them to men twice his size. "Reese," he called, "bring a few of the women to the fence. Let them know what's cooking. Maybe calm their nerves some." Reese hesitated. "Sir, that allowed?" Henderson gave a faint shrug. "Ain't forbidden either." The young soldier jogged off, his helmet bouncing on his head. Henderson watched him go, then took off his hat and wiped the sweat from his brow. The war felt far away here, an ocean away, but it lived in the air all the same. It was in the way the women flinched at every sudden sound, in the way the guards laughed too loud, pretending not to feel guilty. Morales stepped out of the kitchen, holding a tin plate stacked with crisp bacon. "Smells better out here," he said. "Even the wind's drooling." "Don't get poetic on me, Morales." "I was born poetic, sir, just disguised as a cook." Henderson allowed himself a short laugh. He learned early that humor was the only thing that made this strange arrangement bearable. Texans feeding Germans, men who'd never left the county suddenly responsible for prisoners from across the sea. At the fence, Reese approached with cautious optimism. The women stepped back, wary. He gestured toward the mess hall, miming eating. "Breakfast," he said, smiling. "Bacon. You like?" Helga crossed her arms, her expression stone. "You feed prisoners with such luxury?" Reese scratched his neck. "Ma'am, it's standard issue. Might not be luxury, but it sure ain't poison." Ingrid's eyes softened. "Poison is not what we fear." Something in her voice caught him off guard, soft, cracked like an old violin. For a moment, the fence seemed thinner than it was. Back near the kitchen, Morales leaned against the doorway, watching the exchange. "They look half-starved and half-angry," he said. Henderson nodded. "That's what pride and hunger make. A dangerous mix." He paused, eyes narrowing at Helga. You'd think they'd be grateful. Morales flipped the last slice of bacon and said quietly, maybe grateful ain't something that survives war easy. The breakfast bell rang, sharp, metallic. Inside the camp, boots shuffled, trays clanged. The smell thickened, sweet and salty, wrapping around the fence like invisible rope. Some of the women looked away, embarrassed by their own hunger. One reached for her stomach instinctively. Helga did not move, but her jaw clenched. The smell of bacon, it was a scent she remembered from her brother's wedding, from the Sunday mornings before everything burned. It was unbearable. She blinked hard, the dryness of the Texas wind mixing with the salt of her tears. Ingrid whispered, "They're kind." Helga's reply was sharp, though her voice trembled. "They are victors. Kindness cost them nothing." Henderson caught the tone, even from a distance. He turned to Morales. "You ever notice? Mercy looks different depending on which side of the fence you're standing." Morales smirked. "I just cook, sir. But if Mercy smells like bacon, I'll keep frying." The men laughed, though quietly. The war might have been a world away, but it pressed against every moment, silent, waiting for someone to break the spell. As the last plates were served, the women began to move toward their barracks. A few glanced back once, as if the smoke itself were calling to them. Ingrid lingered longest. She turned, lifted her eyes to the mess hall, and met Morales's gaze. He gave a small, almost foolish wave with the spatula still in his hand. To his surprise, she smiled. Just once, just barely, but it was enough to make him grin like a fool. Later, Henderson found Morales leaning against the fence, cigarette dangling from his lips. The captain studied the wire, the neat posts, the tidy rows of uniforms beyond. Everything looked orderly. Everything was wrong. "You thinking what I'm thinking, Morales?" "That depends," the cook said. "You thinking about breakfast or conscience?" "Both." A long silence followed, filled only by the whisper of wind through the mesquite. Henderson finally said, "Strangest thing, I used to think fences were built to keep people safe. Now I'm not so sure which side's safer." From across the yard came a sudden sound, a woman's voice, low and raw. Helga was speaking to the others, but her words carried faintly on the breeze. "If this is defeat," she said, "then what is victory?" Henderson turned his head toward the kitchen, where smoke still curled lazily into the morning sky. He exhaled, slow and heavy. "Keep the bacon coming," he murmured. Morales grinned. "Yes, sir. I got a feeling breakfast just got complicated." The captain didn't answer. He just watched the smoke drift higher, dissolving into the pale blue of the Texas sky, an offering, a question, or maybe a warning. And as the sun climbed over the plains, the smell of bacon lingered longer than it should have, heavy with something none of them yet dared to name. Morning came with a wind that tasted of dust and salt, carrying the low hum of insects and the distant clatter of trays. Beyond the fence, the German women moved in slow, deliberate rhythms, washing uniforms, mending torn sleeves, sweeping dirt that never stayed gone. The Texas light was cruel. It revealed everything: the shine of barbed wire, the red clay beneath their feet, and the weariness that no uniform could hide. Helga Bauer worked the laundry line, her sleeves rolled up, arms reddened by the sun. The scent of soap and sweat clung to her like a second skin. Around her, voices murmured in German, soft, resigned, always careful not to sound defiant. She had been in the camp for 3 months, long enough to learn the routine, not long enough to stop counting the days. She no longer dreamed of rescue. She dreamed of rain or silence, or the sound of anything other than orders shouted in English. Ingrid Keller knelt beside a garden bed that the Americans had permitted them to cultivate. Parsley, a few struggling tomatoes, a stubborn patch of corn that refused to die. She pressed her fingers into the warm dirt, as if testing whether the earth here could remember home. "It's strange," she said quietly, not looking up. "Even the soil feels foreign." Helga hung a wet sheet on the line, squinting against the glare. "Don't get sentimental, Ingrid. Dirt is dirt, but some dirt forgives." Helga said nothing. Her hands trembled as she reached for another shirt. Forgiveness was a word that had lost its meaning long before she stepped on the ship that brought her here. A guard tower loomed nearby, its wooden beams creaking. Private Eddie Reese sat up there with his binoculars, chewing gum like it was a military duty. He wasn't sure what to think of the women. They looked more like exhausted housewives than prisoners of a defeated army. He'd grown up on a farm outside Amarillo. His mother had the same rough hands, the same way of squinting into the sun. Sometimes, when the wind carried their laughter faintly to his post, he felt an ache he couldn't name. Below, Sergeant Morales carried a crate of flour toward the kitchen, humming his usual tune. He waved to the women through the fence. Ingrid waved back. Helga didn't. Morales shouted, "We got a surplus today? Maybe biscuits if you're lucky." Ingrid smiled faintly. "Biscuits," she called back, her accent bending the word. "Sweetbread," he explained. "American magic." Helga muttered, "Food is never free." Morales didn't hear her, but Henderson did. The captain stood a few yards away, clipboard in hand, pretending to check inventory. His expression was hard to read, part habit, part defense. He had spent his life judging men by the firmness of their handshake, not by the weight of their conscience. Yet these women made him uneasy. He couldn't reconcile the words enemy prisoner with the way they looked through the fence. Patient, polite, hollow-eyed, and, sometimes, laughing. That afternoon, the sun burned white over the plains. Heat shimmered above the tin roofs. The air tasted of iron and ash. The camp quieted to a slow pulse. In the barracks, Helga sat at a wooden table with a needle and thread. Ingrid read from a torn English magazine, a wartime issue of Life, its glossy pages full of smiling soldiers and victory gardens. "Listen," Ingrid said, translating softly. "In America, the women keep the home fires burning." She closed the magazine. "They make it sound like a holiday." Helga's needle paused mid-stitch. "They have never heard the sirens. They have never buried a child in rubble." "Not yet," Ingrid said. "But they could." Helga's hand trembled, the needle pricking her thumb. A bead of blood welled up, bright against the dull fabric. She wiped it away, whispering, "War takes everything, even the words to describe it." Outside, Morales prepared dinner with his usual flair, tossing potatoes into a pan like a stage performer. Reese watched him from the side door, amused. "You ever stop smiling, Sarge?" "Not if I can help it," Morales said. "A man who frowns while cooking ruins the meal." Reese chuckled. "You think they even like our food?" Morales shrugged. "Doesn't matter. What matters is we share it." He paused, flipping a potato slice. "You ever notice, kid, how they stop talking when the bacon hits the pan?" Reese frowned. "You saying they're scared?" "I'm saying," Morales replied, "sometimes smell brings back ghosts." When the dinner bell rang, the women lined up silently. Trays slid across the counter. Steam rose in ghostly curls. Morales served each portion with the same gentle motion, never rushed, never careless. Ingrid thanked him softly each time. Helga refused to meet his eyes, though she accepted the food. After the meal, the women sat on the barracks steps, the sky glowing red as coals. Some knitted, others stared at nothing. The sound of a harmonica drifted from the soldiers' quarters, a slow tune, half blues, half hymn. Ingrid tilted her head, listening. "It's beautiful," she said. Helga's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "It's a song for men who have never lost." "Perhaps," Ingrid said, "but even victors need to mourn something." In the fading light, Henderson walked the perimeter. His shadow stretched long across the ground. When he reached the corner where the women sat, he stopped. "You'll be receiving sewing materials tomorrow," he said. "For uniforms." Ingrid nodded politely. "Thank you, Captain." Helga looked up sharply. "You want us to sew for your army?" Henderson met her stare. "No, for your own. To keep you busy." Helga's voice cooled. "We are already busy surviving." The captain didn't reply. He turned and walked away, boots crunching against gravel. That night, thunder rolled across the plains, distant, low, like the sound of trains far away. Rain came in thin, hesitant drops. Inside the barracks, the women sat in silence, listening. For the first time in months, the air smelled clean. Ingrid closed her eyes. "It almost sounds like home," she whispered. Helga lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She imagined the war continuing without her, her city burning, her brother missing, her mother waiting by an empty window. Shame, sharper than hunger, filled her chest. She thought of the Americans' laughter, their easy abundance. It was unbearable that their kindness hurt worse than cruelty. Morning came gray and soft. The rain had stopped, leaving puddles that mirrored the fence. Helga walked out to hang the damp clothes again. As she did, she saw Morales carrying a new pan from the kitchen. He noticed her and called out, "You ever cook, Fräulein?" She froze. "I was a nurse." He smiled. "Close enough. Both keep people alive." For a heartbeat, she almost smiled back, but turned away before he could see. Ingrid joined her, whispering he's kind. "Too kind," Helga said. "It makes me hate him." "Hate?" Ingrid's voice was gentle. "Or envy?" Helga's throat tightened. "Both." From the tower, Reese watched them, a cigarette glowing between his fingers. He thought of his mother's voice, how she used to hum hymns while cooking. Something in the sight below, the women working under the pale sky, the cook joking through the fence, made him wonder if war really knew where it ended. By midday, the sun blazed again. Henderson called Morales and Reese into the office. The captain held a telegram. The paper creased and damp with sweat. "We're getting new orders," he said. "More prisoners coming in from Arizona. Same conditions, but stricter supervision." Morales frowned. "Meaning?" Henderson's jaw tightened. "Meaning less friendliness. Command thinks we're running a picnic out here." Reese muttered. "You mean we're not?" The captain ignored him. "I want no trouble. We follow procedure, keep it clean." But he paused, glancing toward the window where Helga and Ingrid worked. "We don't stop being human." "Understood." Morales nodded slowly. "Understood, sir." That evening, as the women gathered for roll call, a strange hush fell over the camp. The usual jokes, the lazy drawl of guards, all faded. The smell of supper drifted again, same as every night, but heavier somehow, weighted with the knowledge that something unseen had shifted. Helga noticed it first. The way Henderson stood stiffer than usual, the way Morales avoided her gaze. She leaned close to Ingrid. "Something has changed," she said. Ingrid followed her eyes toward the kitchen, where the cook stood silently, spatula idle in his hand. The smoke rose straight up, no wind to bend it. Ingrid whispered, "Perhaps tomorrow we cook." Helga blinked, confused. "We, them, and us," Ingrid said, almost smiling. "The fence won't hold forever." Helga laughed once, a small, startled sound that caught in her throat. "You dream too much." But even as she said it, the smell of bacon drifted through the air again, warm, defiant, human. And for the first time, Helga didn't look away. Dawn came slow. The sky stretched pale gold over the flat Texas plains, and the camp stirred like something waking from an uneasy dream. Smoke already trailed from the mess hall chimney, thin and gray, twisting into the morning air. Inside, Sergeant Morales hummed as he wiped down the counter, sleeves rolled, his breath fogging in the cool air that always came before the heat. Captain Henderson stood in the doorway, hat low, his expression unreadable. "They're coming in today," Henderson said. "You'll supervise." Morales paused, raising an eyebrow. "The women, them." Henderson's voice carried quiet weight. "They'll help cook. Command approved it. Calls it morale building. Guess they don't know whose morale they're building." Morales chuckled under his breath. "Guess we'll find out." Outside, the gate creaked open. A line of German women walked toward the kitchen, half curious, half uncertain. Helga Bauer led them, her back straight despite the dust on her uniform. Ingrid Keller walked beside her, hair tucked beneath a kerchief, eyes wide with cautious wonder. Private Reese followed at a respectful distance, rifle slung loosely at his shoulder, looking more nervous than any of them. When Helga stepped into the kitchen, she froze. The smell hit first, smoke, grease, a sweetness she hadn't known since home. A skillet hissed on the stove. Light slanted through the small windows, cutting through the haze, catching the dust in the air like floating stars. Morales gestured to the counter. "Apron's there. Try not to burn anything we can't eat." Helga hesitated, then slipped one over her head. The fabric smelled faintly of soap and iron. She looked at the tools, metal spatulas, flour sacks, a bowl of eggs, and felt something stir she hadn't expected. The memory of her mother's kitchen came back sharp. Bread rising, the clatter of plates, the sound of a radio playing through static. She blinked hard, pushing the thought away. Ingrid touched her arm gently. "It feels human, doesn't it?" Helga's reply was quiet. "It feels dangerous." Morales moved easily among them, showing where to pour the batter, how to keep the heat steady. He joked without thinking, his humor light, disarming. "Careful, that pan bites. She's meaner than a rattlesnake if you let her cool too fast." The women laughed softly, the sound awkward at first, then easier. Even Helga allowed herself the faintest smile. For a moment, the camp's invisible weight lifted. Reese leaned against the doorframe, watching. He'd never seen anything like it. Enemy prisoners flipping pancakes beside an American cook, trading smiles like they weren't supposed to. He whispered, almost to himself, "This ain't in the manual." Henderson, standing beside him, said, "War rarely is." Flour dust hung in the air. Sunlight spilled across it, turning the room bright and hazy. Ingrid cracked eggs with a surgeon's precision, humming a lullaby in German. Morales joined in with a country tune, off-key but proud. The strange harmony filled the space like a bridge no one planned to build. Helga, standing at the stove, picked up a spatula. Her hand shook slightly. She steadied them, pressed the bacon flat against the pan. The hiss rose, sharp, alive, the sound of something transforming. She closed her eyes, breathing it in. For the first time since capture, she felt warmth that wasn't from the sun. Morales watched her carefully. "You've done this before." She nodded once. "My father was a butcher. I learned not to waste anything." "Then you'll do fine here." Helga turned, studying his face. His tone was simple, but something in it felt different. Not pity, not command, just respect. She didn't know how to return it. Ingrid wiped her hands, smiling. "You see, Helga, even bacon doesn't care for politics." Morales laughed. "That's the first true thing I've heard all war." Henderson stepped inside then, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. The laughter died down, but not from fear, more from instinct. He looked around the room, the flour on the counters, the steam fogging the windows, the strange peace humming through the air. "Smells better than regulation coffee," he said. "Smells like peace," Morales answered. Henderson almost smiled. "Don't get poetic on me, Sergeant." The first plates were ready. Helga and Ingrid carried them out to the tables. The other prisoners followed, unsure, whispering. American soldiers watched from a distance, uncertain whether to laugh or salute. The women sat, some trembling, some smiling, as the first bites disappeared. Someone whispered, "Got, it's real bacon." And suddenly the sound of quiet weeping filled the mess hall, soft, muffled, but spreading like rain. No one mocked it. Even the guards looked away. Helga stood still, plate untouched, watching as the women around her cried. She didn't understand it at first. Why this moment? Why now? But when Ingrid reached across the table and squeezed her hand, she felt something inside give way, small and sharp. Outside, the wind shifted. The barbed wire fence hummed as it caught the breeze, a low metallic note that blended with laughter, sniffles, and the crackle of frying bacon. The sound was almost musical. Morales leaned out the kitchen window, wiping his hands. "You see that?" he said to Reese. "That's what mercy looks like." Reese frowned. "Looks messy to me." "Mercy always is." Henderson said nothing. He just watched, his jaw set, eyes distant, as if trying to memorize the scene. He'd seen plenty of order in his life. Drills, parades, funerals. This was something else. Something unruly, sacred, maybe even dangerous. Helga sat finally, taking a bite. The taste was hot, salty, perfect. She chewed slowly, as if trying to remember what gratitude used to feel like. Her eyes stung, though the air wasn't smoky. Ingrid whispered beside her, "It's not about food, is it?" Helga shook her head. "No, it's about being fed." The room settled into a strange calm. Soldiers and prisoners shared the same silence, each lost in a different thought. Outside, sunlight spread across the yard, touching the fence, the towers, the worn Texas grass. Morales served the last plate and leaned against the counter, exhausted but grinning. Henderson clapped a hand to his shoulder. "Good work." The cook shrugged. "Didn't do much, sir. Just fed some hungry souls." Henderson's gaze drifted to the fence. "That's more than most wars accomplish." A bell rang in the distance, the signal for inspection. Instantly, the air changed. The spell broke. The women stiffened, soldiers straightened, laughter vanished. Helga stood, her expression calm again, but her eyes betrayed something fierce and bright. She looked at Henderson. "Thank you, Captain." He hesitated. "For what?" "For letting us remember we were human." He nodded once, unable to speak. Ingrid looked back toward the stove, where smoke still curled up to the ceiling. "Maybe tomorrow," she said softly, "we teach them to make bread." Helga smiled, weary but true. "Maybe." Then, from the far end of the camp, a truck engine roared. Dust rose as it approached, tires grinding over gravel. A soldier ran toward Henderson, waving a paper. The captain's expression darkened before he even read it. Morales saw it too, his grin fading. "Orders?" Henderson nodded grimly. "New regulations. No more contact. No shared kitchens." For a long moment, no one moved. The air went still. The women looked on from the tables, confused by the sudden tension. Helga's eyes found Henderson's, searching for explanation. He couldn't meet them. The truck stopped. Dust swallowed the scene in a pale cloud. The bacon smoke mingled with it, curling together into a strange gray haze that smelled of endings. Ingrid whispered, "What's happening?" Helga didn't answer. She knew. The moment was over. But as the bell rang again, sharp and metallic, she looked once more toward the stove, where the last bit of bacon still sizzled, untouched. The sound rose, faint and persistent, a memory trying not to fade. The orders came before sunrise, printed on thin paper that smelled of ink and salt. Captain Henderson read them twice under the weak light of his desk lamp, each word pressing heavier on his chest. No fraternization, no shared duties. Reinstate full separation effective immediately. He folded the telegram neatly, though his hands trembled once before finding stillness. Outside, the wind dragged against the tin roofs, restless, as if it already knew something sacred was about to end. When he stepped out, the camp looked almost peaceful. The sky had not yet burned into its cruel blue. A soft gray hung over the plains, the kind that makes everything, barbed wire, watchtowers, men, seem gentler than it is. From the kitchen, faint music played, Morales humming again, same tune as always. The sound of skillet hissing joined it, the rhythm of ordinary mercy. Henderson paused outside the door, knowing that when he entered, he would shatter it. Inside, the women were already at work. Helga Bauer flipped bacon with the precision of a soldier cleaning a rifle. Ingrid Keller stirred batter, her fingers dusted white, her face half lit by the stove's glow. Morales moved between them with exaggerated cheer. "You see, that's how you win a war. Feed your enemies till they forget they lost." The women laughed, soft but real. Henderson cleared his throat. The laughter died. "Captain," Morales greeted, straightening. "You're just in time for breakfast diplomacy." Henderson looked around the room. The warmth, the smell, the strange peace he'd allowed to bloom. "That'll be enough," he said quietly. Helga froze. "Enough." He didn't meet her eyes. "You're to return to your quarters. Immediately. Kitchen privileges are suspended." The silence that followed felt heavier than any gunfire he'd heard. Ingrid's whisk slipped from her hand and clattered onto the counter. Morales frowned. "Sir, that's orders." Henderson's voice was flat. "Came this morning." Helga's jaw tightened. "Why now?" "We did nothing wrong." Henderson's reply was tired, not cruel. Sometimes right and wrong don't fit in the same uniform. The women said nothing. One by one, they untied their aprons, setting them neatly on the counter. The smell of bacon hung in the air, mocking the stillness. Ingrid turned toward the captain, her voice barely above a whisper. "You showed us kindness. Does that end too?" Henderson hesitated. In that pause, something inside him cracked, quietly like wood under strain. "Kindness isn't mine to give," he said. "Not today." Helga stepped closer, her eyes sharp as glass. "Then whose is it?" For a heartbeat, he didn't answer. Then softer, "No one's, it seems." Morales slammed his spatula onto the stove, grease popping like gunfire. "To hell with that." "Sergeant," Henderson warned. "No, sir." Morales's voice rose. "We've been guarding ghosts out here, pretending the war's still at our doorstep. You seen these women? They're tired, scared, human. Same as us. You tell command they can take their orders, and that's enough." Henderson snapped, but his anger wasn't at Morales. It was at himself, at the wire, at the absurdity of it all. He turned away, but not before catching Helga's eyes. Wet, not with weakness, but with something fiercer. Without another word, the women filed out. The door creaked shut behind them, and the kitchen seemed to exhale. Morales stood motionless, staring at the empty doorway. The stove crackled once, then went still. The sound of the fence outside filled the silence, a faint metallic hum as the wind brushed the wire. Hours passed. The day grew harsh. Soldiers moved with mechanical obedience, cleaning rifles, counting supplies, pretending not to notice the quiet absence of laughter. By noon, the camp felt hollow, as if sound itself refused to cross the fence. Henderson sat on the steps outside his office, hat in his hands. Reese approached hesitantly. "Sir, the women ain't eaten. They're refusing lunch." He didn't look up. "They'll eat eventually." Reese shifted uneasily. "They said they'd wait for the cook." Henderson's throat tightened. "Morales." "Yes, sir." He stood slowly, bones creaking like old timber. "Get him." When Morales arrived, his apron was gone, his expression unreadable. Henderson handed him a plate. "Take this over." Morales stared at it. "Against orders?" Henderson met his gaze. "Orders don't cover hunger." The two men walked together toward the fence. On the other side, the women stood in a small cluster, sun beating down on their pale faces. Helga at the front, chin high. Ingrid beside her, hands clasped tight. The guards watched, but said nothing. The camp had never been quieter. Morales stopped a few feet from the fence and set the plate on the ground. The bacon was already cooling, grease glistening in the light. "Breakfast," he said softly. No one moved. Then Helga stepped forward. She crouched, reaching through the lowest gap in the wire. Her fingers brushed the plate, trembling slightly. Henderson's eyes followed that motion, the brief contact between skin and steel, human and boundary. The moment hung there, stretched thin as wire. Then, without warning, a gust of wind swept across the plains. It rattled the fence so violently that the posts shuddered in the ground. The barbed strands sang, a metallic wail that filled the air like music too tragic to be ignored. Dust rose, swirling between the two sides until no one could tell where prisoner ended and guard began. Morales whispered, "Sounds like it's crying." Helga looked up at him through the haze. "No," she said. "It's listening." The wind died as quickly as it came. The fence stilled, its hum fading into silence. Helga took the plate and passed it back to the others. No one spoke. They ate slowly, reverently, as if each bite carried something more than food. Proof that even walls could hunger for mercy. Henderson turned away, eyes burning. "This never happened," he said quietly. Morales nodded. "No, sir, but it'll be remembered." That night, the sky turned red at the edges, the color of embers refusing to die. The camp lay still, except for the soft creak of the fence in the wind. Inside the barracks, Ingrid wrote a few lines on the back of a ration label, her handwriting small and neat. "Today," she wrote, "the fence stopped singing." We did not. Weeks later, after the war ended, a letter arrived at Henderson's ranch, the envelope marked with foreign stamps. He opened it under the same lamp that had once lit his orders. The handwriting was familiar, Helga's. "Captain," it read, "I hope the smoke still rises over your plains. We remember the morning you disobeyed silence." He folded the letter slowly, his hand steady this time. Outside, the wind swept through the dry grass, carrying the faint scent of something warm, something remembered. He could almost hear the skillet again, could almost see the faces across the fence. He whispered to no one, maybe that's how wars end, not with surrender, but with breakfast. And as the Texas night deepened, the fence outside the old ranch stood quiet at last, its rusted wire glinting under the moonlight. Silent, yes, but no longer cruel.